All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce our two speakers that we have, I just wanted to let you know if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please click on the Q&A button, and we will be monitoring that to let David answer those questions at the end. So we will have Deborah Sittaway here soon to introduce our main speaker, which is David Norton. He will be talking to us about the ins and outs of conducting an effective workplace investigation. So I am now going to turn this over to Deborah and let her introduce David.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. David Norton is going to be taking care of our presentation, and David has 35 plus years of strategic and functional HR experience across many states and industries and HR functions. So he's a wealth of knowledge. He is also SPHR and SHRM SCP certified. And we look forward to hearing David take us through conducting effective workplace investigations. David, I'll turn it over to you.
David, you're on mute.
So I am. That is one of the most common phrases of this part of the century. You're on mute. Thank you for the introductions, and we appreciate you all coming out and spending some time this morning. The topic today, conducting effective workplace investigations. Knowing when and how to conduct an investigation, it's an important tool in avoiding and minimizing work-related claims and lowering the risk of legal challenges which might come from failing to do an investigation and to take appropriate actions. Employers are legally required to investigate certain claims, such as discrimination, harassment, safety violations. You'd want to investigate workplace theft and things like that. Also, it's often there are company policies which require investigations to be conducted. So the goals of what we're going to be talking about this morning are understanding why the investigations are needed, learning the key elements of an investigation, reviewing the steps to the effective investigation, talk about some potential investigation pitfalls, talk about the typical progressive disciplinary process, and how to do a termination if it comes to that. So why investigate? Some people might ask, why are these investigations even necessary? Don't we have enough to do without playing Sherlock Holmes? Unfortunately, the need for doing investigations is just another part of the supervisor or manager's job. There can be a lot of reasons that an investigation is necessary. Some of the more common ones are behavioral issues, substance abuse, potential substance abuse issues, complaints of discrimination or harassment, threats, looking into vandalism or sabotage, workplace theft, and certainly looking into safety concerns. Things which do have a legal obligation along with it would be following the anti-discrimination laws, following OSHA requirements, labor laws, and drug-free workplace laws. Each type of problem may have a slightly different method of investigation, but there are some common threads running through each of these. First, the investigator has to be knowledgeable about the state and federal employment laws. Knowledgeable is not the same as an absolute master in, but you have to have a good sense of awareness. You need to uphold the privacy rights of the employees and others insofar as possible. The investigation needs to be thorough, but not dragged out too long. It needs to be objective. And keep in mind that the ultimate goal is discovering the underlying reasons, causations of the situation so that corrective action can be taken. Investigations can be an effective tool for management to use in analyzing the reasons for problems or for gathering the data to make management decisions. Before I go any further, I do want to mention that we will have a Q&A at the end of this presentation, and yes, the slides will be provided later this afternoon. You'll get, everyone who's on here will receive a copy of the slide deck. So we're going to talk a bit now about the investigation process. Um, Again, these are intended to determine what happened in an incident, a series of instances, and how to find a resolution. So, first thing is timeliness. Workplace problems almost never go away on their own. They usually just get worse if the person who is doing wrong thinks that he or she can continue to get away with this without any sort of consequences. Fairness. The investigator has to take the concerns seriously, keep an open mind toward determining what really happened, and recognize that there's an impact on the investigation um, on the people who are involved, either whether they're on the victim side or the person doing it or allegedly doing things. Unbiased. Neutral approach is really critical. There can't be a perception that the investigator stands to gain or lose something from the outcome of the investigation. That's why it's really important to get a third party involved. The unbiased person is going to be more likely to look at all the aspects and rather than ignore certain inconvenient truths, shall we say. The investigator has to understand the key facts of the case, be able to provide a good summary to the decision makers regarding who, what, where, why, when, how things happened. Once this can all be answered satisfactorily, the resolution usually makes itself pretty obvious. Documentation. Cannot overemphasize the need for good documentation, thorough documentation. It's probably the most important part of an investigation. You've got to have good notes so you can refer to them weeks, months, years later if necessary. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the steps involved in conducting an investigation. We have 9 steps in all. First off, taking in the complaint. The complaints are generally received by a management level official, sometimes a lower ranked person, but usually it's a supervisor, manager, office admin, HR admin. And some companies have anonymous hotline phone numbers for employees to file complaints. When someone comes forward with a complaint or a grievance, realize this can be a very difficult and emotional moment for them. So it's important that whoever's receiving this um, stay as neutral as possible. Body language, verbal responses, gather the information that's necessary. Determine that this is the full complaint, that they're not going to come back and say, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you." Um, just verify there's no other related issues. Ask the person who they feel should be spoken to regarding the whole thing. It's good to ask them to keep all of this confidential. Don't go talking to their work colleagues or talking in the break room about what's going on. We want to keep this as neutral and level of playing field as possible. And at the end of the meeting, thank the person for coming forward. This has been a difficult decision for them often. And in many ways, they're doing management a favor by letting them know that something's going on that needs to be addressed. The second one is the second step, I should say, making the initial determination. Not every complaint needs a full-blown deep dive investigation. A lot of times, things can get resolved pretty quickly with the support and goodwill of everyone who's concerned.
David,
Yes?
apologies for interrupting you. We've got some listeners that are saying they're having a hard time hearing you. Can you double check that your volume's up?
Okay, just a moment. Audio setting. Okay, is that better?
It is on my end, so hopefully that helps the others.
Okay, all right. Yeah, Zoom does weird things. It decides to reset my microphone level. When it thinks I'm talking too loudly, it just lowers the volume. Okay. Sorry about that. Interim actions. In some situations, it can be necessary to well, you need to take some immediate actions to keep things from getting worse. This could include putting someone on a paid or unpaid administrative leave, doing a shift change, a department change, some other accommodation. And these are short-term temporary measures that get put in place while all the details are being gathered and assessed. Planning is important. Good investigation needs to be planned out. Is only one person going to do all of the interviews? If others are going to be involved, who are they? In what roles? Who's going to be the lead investigator? Who's going to file the report? Who's going to make the decision of what to do at the end of it all? The fifth step is conducting the interviews. Again, you want to determine who's going to be interviewed, where the interviews are going to be held. Have a series of questions laid out. The interviews should be done in private. Free-form interviews can work, but all too often they go wandering off into unrelated territory. So you want to avoid mission creep. You certainly want to interview the alleged perpetrators as well, get their side of the story early on in the process if that's possible. Keep in mind that this is a workplace investigation. This is not a criminal investigation. We are not law enforcement. That being said, the basic precept of innocent until proven guilty is a good one to follow. Again, please remind your witnesses, the people you've talked to keep this quiet, keep it confidential to avoid witness contamination, for lack of a better term. And also certainly remind people that retaliation just will not be tolerated. Many times the initial complaint is minor and easy to fix, but then there's a retaliatory action afterward, which blows things just really way out of proportion and makes things much worse. The sixth step is data review. Once you've gotten all the information and all the interviews have been completed, this is where the lead investigator needs to decide if the information is consistent, if it's credible, sort out any contradictions, sort out any conflicting statements, and make follow-up questions, second interviews if necessary. Provide a written report, a summary of the facts that have been gathered. You want to have enough information in that a decision can be reached. You want to have a summary of the complaint, a list of who was interviewed, copies of any documents that may have been reviewed. You're going to talk about the findings, talk about any sort of inconsistencies, contradictions, conflicts of interest. And if it's within the investigating party's scope of authority, make a recommendation of what to do next. The eighth step is the determination, whether it's the lead investigator or executive management or ownership. There needs to be some decisions. What corrective actions, what preventative actions, what disciplinary actions, who's going to carry these out, and what's the time frame. Then finally, you want to close the loop. Meet with the person who made the initial complaint, who brought this information forward. Again, thank them for bringing it to your attention and let them know that the investigation was done. You can summarize the outcome. The complaining party is absolutely not entitled to know all the details, particularly of any sort of disciplinary actions. Just saying it's been taken care of should be sufficient. If someone's been transferred or terminated or something, they're going to figure it out pretty well. But again, respecting confidentiality, you don't want to be notifying them of that directly. Okay, so what are some pitfalls we need to talk about to avoid? Common one is halo and horn syndrome. This is where the investigator consciously or more often subconsciously is predetermined that the information they're getting from someone, they're thinking about it in terms of their existing relationship and knowledge of that person. So the halo effect, they have an over positive impression because they rely on this person, they trust this person, and they may overlook negative characteristics. And the horn effect is the opposite, where the negative impressions take the center stage. Ignoring concerns. One big mistake a company can make is to ignore a complaint. This can happen sometimes because the employee comes forward and says, "Hey, I have this situation, but I don't want you to do anything about it." Okay, some information does warrant confidentiality, but once supervision and management is made aware of the situation, the clock is ticking and something has to be done. There's also a situation that occurs where the employee says that they want to handle this on their own. Okay, you can again let that happen, but be aware, monitor, and if the situation continues, then you go to the next steps. Rushing or delaying an investigation. We've talked about the various steps that are needed. Sometimes there's a sense of panic takes place, and that leads to a rushed set of incomplete interviews, incomplete investigations, snap decisions, jumping to conclusions. And you've got to make sure you have the facts in place. On the other hand, delaying things is a problem as well. Investigations need to be started promptly once you learn there's an issue. Follow the company policies, and most policies are going to say there will be a prompt investigation. One of the worst things that a company could face is you get into a hearing with a judge or an arbitrator who thinks the company was negligent in conducting an investigation. They dragged their feet for way too long, and that allowed the potential misconduct to be continuing. Or planning is an issue as well, or not planning it at all. Starting a journey when you have no idea where you're heading is just not a good idea. In the context of workplace investigations, it happens more often than you might think. We talked about this, but it's critical to begin the investigation with an idea of the scope, what questions you're going to ask, what are you going to explore, who you're going to talk to, a basic roadmap. Now, this can change midstream, certainly. You may decide you're not going to interview this witness, you're going to add someone else, there may be some new documentation, new information that comes to light. That's all perfectly reasonable, but have a sense of where you're trying to get to. Victim blaming. Sometimes even the best intentioned employers, they decide that the simplest response is they're going to transfer the person who brought forward the complaint or put that person on a paid leave. And sometimes it's a good idea, but anything that looks like you're retaliating against the complainant, the victim, can be real detrimental real quickly. It's better to temporarily transfer or suspend the accused party while doing an investigation. And that way the person who brought the information forward is not being punished, not being disadvantaged. There's also a situation where during the investigation, someone decides that one party's version of the events is true and the other party's version is completely untrue, and then they, again, consciously or more often subconsciously, slant the rest of the investigation from a neutral to a biased perspective. And you just want to make sure that doesn't happen, and the investigation continues in a fair manner. So ideally, when problems come up at work, they can be solved with discussions, coaching, training. Sometimes all the encouragement and motivation and pep talks in the world don't fix it, and then you have to go to the formal corrective action process. It's a good idea to put a positive spin into corrective actions. Discipline should be seen as giving guidance, coaching someone in a positive and helpful manner, not coming down on them like a house of bricks. Make sure to let the employee take ownership of the situation, help them to understand that whatever was done or whatever was not done was not acceptable, regardless of whether the behavior was intentional. The first time it happens, it can often be corrected by casual discussion, explain the situation, give guidance for how it could have been done differently. But again, sometimes that doesn't work out, and then we get to go to the more formal stages of discipline. So here is the classic model of progressive discipline: verbal warning to written, to final written, to suspension, to a discharge. You want to make sure that things are well documented. The supervisor or the manager is going to make a note that on such and such a day, I talked to X employee about X situation. Make sure the employee knows it's being documented. They've basically landed on square one of the progressive disciplinary process. Again, this moves forward to the written warning, to the final written warning. If the things still don't get resolved, the employee can be suspended without pay for some period of time, usually 3 days to 2 weeks, depending on the severity of the violation. And then finally, if all the warnings and all the discussions just aren't panning out, it's time to part company. Employee discharges have to be done with thought and preparation, and we're going to talk more about that pretty quickly here. A couple of other thoughts first on the progressive discipline process. While what I've just gone over is the classic progressive system and sequence, there certainly are situations which are so serious that a suspension or a discharge is the appropriate action on the first instance. In these kind of high tension, high stress scenarios, the best thing to do is send the employee home pending an investigation. A snap decision to fire someone just shouldn't be made in the heat of the moment, even when that seems the obvious and only choice. Don't let the adrenaline get ahead of you. Get a neutral third party, HR, management, someone else involved in it. Don't just do it all right away, because that's all too often that just leads to bigger problems, or additional problems, I should say. Okay, so talk a bit now about employment terminations, which is always an awkward topic. Terminating employees is probably the least enjoyable part of being a supervisor. A longtime manager once said to me that the first 800 discharges are the hardest, and I'm on number 768. There's some truth to that. Regardless, discharging employees who aren't measuring up is part of the supervisory management job. Make sure to coordinate this with the HR team, or if you don't have a formal HR team, coordinate it with senior management or ownership. Again, have a neutral third person review all the facts before the final decision gets made. Documentation, we talked about that a few minutes ago. Bring it up again. Document, document, document. It is so critical to have good records and a good paper trail in case you have an unemployment hearing, or worse, a wrongful discharge claim. A truism is that people fire themselves. Most of the time, the terminations which are done for cause happen because of the employee's own choices and own behaviors. Presumably, you've spoken to them about it, you've given them opportunity to correct their mistakes, they should have learned, and it just hasn't happened. So it's important to put the best interests of the team and the company ahead of the interests of the individual. Again, reiterating, don't fire someone in the heat of the moment. It's tempting that they've done something, you're just furious, and you want to just get rid of them immediately. Again, suspend them pending an investigation, take a cool down period, get someone else involved, and again, documentation. Lastly, and this gets overlooked sometimes, when the employment relationship is ending, remember it's another human being on the receiving end of this. Let them, insofar as possible, let them be able to walk out of the building with their pride and their dignity intact. That just is pretty critical. Okay, so here's a wrap up of what we've gone over. We talked about the need for the investigations, talked about the key elements, reviewed the steps to the effective investigation, potential pitfalls, and the disciplinary and terminations process. So with that, I'm going to pop it over. And do we have any questions that have come in, Deb?
Yes, David, we do have a couple. Thank you. I'm glad we have a few minutes to do that. So the first one is, in the event that we learn about an incident, but the witness doesn't want to officially report, document it, or sit for any kind of an interview with the investigator, are there any additional things that should be done when running into these investigations?
Yeah, that gets to be a little bit subtle, but you want to note down, okay, this person said that this is what happened. If you've learned about something, how did you learn about it? When did you learn about it? What was the way? And there's usually other people involved. There's usually some sort of a trail that can be followed, however thin. People may be afraid of retaliation. They may be afraid of physical violence. Let's be honest about it. So it's important that you pick up whatever ball you have and roll with it as far as you can.
Thank you. We have another question. What if the person who is the supervisor is not neutral, does not sympathize with the issue, and uses that old slogan of, I'm playing the devil's advocate, and you end up being targeted or in a hostile work environment and nothing is ever done?
That's going to depend on the philosophy of ownership and management. If someone is not being neutral about it and they're being confrontational, that in itself may need some investigation or understanding of why this situation is going on. But if there is a genuine serious problem, someone higher up on the organization needs to push it forward to get it resolved. Sometimes it does require getting vice president, president ownership directly involved to take the action, because at some point in time, the person who is being hostile, who's being negative, they're going to accept authority, ideally.
All right, and we don't have any other questions. I did have a quick comment that came to mind as you were going through your presentation that I just wanted to put out there. We talk about document. One of the things we have to be careful in our documentation is to not use personal interpretations. In other words, statements like "it appears" or "it seems like," that we want to make sure our documents are actually factual, so we don't interject any personal feelings or interpretations into those investigations.
Yep.
Okay, we did have another one come in. Our general manager and production manager have been in a relationship for years. In the past few months, we have had complaints of favoritism. We had planned on sitting down with them to begin an investigation this afternoon, but the general manager submitted his resignation yesterday. Should we still go through with an investigation? Good question.
That's going to be a judgment call. We'd be happy to talk to you about the specifics back line. I don't really want to get into it in front of everyone here. If you feel that the resignation is going to be a sufficient resolution to the problem, you may want to just buy out that person's time rather than have them work out their 2 weeks or whatever. Just pay them out for that amount of time and get them off site today. If you think that there are more issues which may go further along than just the GM, you may want to do an investigation. So it's really a judgment call with way too many nuances and variables to it.
We don't have any other questions from the group.
So one more came in.
Oh, you did. Sorry. Okay. I
Yeah.
didn't scroll down. Apologies. Yes. What if there is nowhere to go and all owners or top level is not an option and do not deal with any of the hostility in the workplace environments? Then what can the people in the work environment who have, basically, where can they go? What can they do? What are their options?
If you can't get ownership and the top people involved, if it's something which is a legal violation, then you may have to go to the authorities. If it's a harassment, discrimination, you can go to the EEOC or the State Labor Commission. If it's not that, then unfortunately, those kind of workplaces do exist, and you just have to make a change. Not the best answer, but when the very top of the food chain at an organization isn't going to be supportive of a friendly, comfortable place to work, there aren't a lot of good options there. Again, if it's a legal violation, take advantage of the municipal or state or county provisions. Other than that, sorry, it happens at times.
It looks like we've got a couple more real quick. Let's see. Okay, one more. Do all companies need to have an HR team or a person? Good question.
What a convenient question. Because
Yes.
if your organization is too small to have a full-time HR person, that's where HR service steps in. And I'm going to segue over to Penny to do a comment about what we offer here. Penny, take it away.
Yes, sorry, I was unmuting myself.
Yep.
So yes, at HR Service, we do provide multiple options for small to medium-sized businesses who may not have, an in-house HR team. So we have our HRE Solutions, which is our online system that, basically walks you through, gives you templates and things like that for you to manage your HR on your own. We also have our fractional HR services, which provide, based on the hours of time that you need help with whatever projects, whether it's like a one-time concern or it's an ongoing need for HR help. Our HR team, which includes David and Deborah and several others, are available to walk you through some of these issues, help you get things under control, and help you kind of bridge that gap. So David has up here a list of some of the different, and this is just a small list of some of the different things that we can help with. We also do these ongoing webinars. We are starting to have a monthly webinar series where we're answering specific questions that people may have, such as the investigations. Our next one will be over the difference between exempt and non-exempt employees and how to manage that. So we have just these different resources. But we, like I said, also offer the ongoing services, the ongoing fractional HR services.
And these fractional HR services, that can be as little as 4 hours a month up to 40 or more hours a month, depending on what your needs are. And we're able to support all 50 states with that, and we do. If you have other questions regarding help or with HR or compliance things, here's our contact information. 833-685-8400 extension 2 or solutions@hrservice.com. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, and thank you all for coming. It's been great. We have our next presentation is going to be coming up in sometime in May.
May 14th to be exact.
Didn't have it handy.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day.